and otherwise, additional documents will be coming to us here in the near future.
Okay, we're on. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We are basically here to talk more about the formality of how we move forward. Everything that we've discussed, it was all-encompassing, everything we were talking about. There was one change for a request to replace in the CIP that we'll talk about here shortly, the McKinley piece that was in and it mysteriously was out, and now it's back in again. It's out about 3 or 4 years, so it doesn't affect the current budget we've got coming in. So I'm just going to take you through a process. If you have questions, again, as I've said before, we'll stay as long or as short as you want to be. At least Joe would like to be out here in 15 minutes, so I think we can probably reach that goal unless there's some questions. So the first thing you're looking at is our CIP that we actually kicked off our budget piece with. We had given an opportunity for the council to kind of weigh in over the last month and a half or so to see if there's any changes. So what you have before you today is staff's recommendation to move forward with the CIP, which includes on page 9 the McKinley piece we talked about. And this CIP before you is 30 cents, so it's exactly where it was when we discussed this in early December. Any detailed questions you'd like to have on the CIP piece, or we can move forward on the other pages?
Did we? I know one of the things we tried to maybe identify pieces that we would cut in the CIP should the March 5th referendum not go forward. Was there?
The beauty of this, Councilman, is that this is the maximum we can do, not the minimum. Scott's already started the conversations that we would be prepared at that time, but to go through the exercise this early, we thought it'd be best to just kind of work along and wait and see what happens. So yes, we're prepared. Remember, when you adopt the budget we bring forward to you, you can bring it down, but you can't bring it up. So changes can be made downward and not upward. So.
Okay.
Bob, I got a question. When we
Yes, sir.
do sewer separation, which category does that go under? Sanitary sewer?
The sewer separation is primarily in the stormwater for the most part, or pieces of it might be in the sanitary as well.
Okay,
Sometimes we split those 50-50.
all right. Thank you.
And then the McKinley piece you have listed as Fleur Drive to Indianola. We specifically just talked about from South Union to Southwest 9th, and that would only be, we don't need a turning lane, that would just be 2 lanes. Is that what the 3.5 is?
I'm going to check to see if Steve is in here at this point.
Steve is.
What section is in there?
The McKinley piece.
I don't know, you've got it listed here as
Page
Fleur
9.
Drive to East Indianola, so I mean, I don't think 3.5 is going to do.
Okay.
Section, what were we talking about?
Just want to be clear where we're at with that.
I know, but I was seeing what, Florida, Indiana.
Yeah, it's right here.
So we're up, you got 3 different years, so that number, you thought it wasn't enough, Joe?
Well, I don't know, given what the small stretch from Southeast 5th to Southeast 14th costs, I would say probably the 3.5 is only going to cover a small stretch, and the other one's probably going to be design and.
750
Right.
there, and there's a.
I think that's correct. That would be just one of the sections. That would not be the entire length of Florida, Indianola.
Really, that's all, yeah, there's
Yeah.
a stretch from South Union to
Southwest 9th. Or
McKinley,
or
yeah.
McKinley, yeah.
But,
So yeah, that, like, one of those stretches is probably $3.5 million, you know. So McKinley from South Union to Southwest 9th to reconstruct as 2 lanes would be $4.5 million,
right, so
And
that's
then-
what that is right there.
just one stretch.
Yes.
Yeah.
From South Union to Southwest 9th.
That's correct, yeah. I think it looks like it's just a general project, because maybe there would be future phases, so that
Yes.
sometimes they name the sheets general. So I think that's probably something we have to work out, and when we prepare the actual sheet, put the description of what the
Right.
phases, yeah.
And I think
That would only be 2
in the past,
lanes.
we've had this in here, not since I've been here, but in the past, this project's been there, and then it's been taken out, put back in, taken out, so I think we should probably label that portion.
what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Steve, just so it's clear to everybody, you've got a amount in the 18-19 budget, right, that ends, and I'm assuming you've already spent the 2.8, is that right?
Yeah, that was the other.
That was the phase that's actually pretty far along already.
Right,
Yeah, which includes the access to the Home Depot and everything.
okay.
Yeah.
So then you got the 3.5, but you got 750, and then you got another 800 and some there, so that's another 5 million?
I can't imagine,
9.
I can't imagine, because they made it 3 lanes, Mr. Mayor, the portion of it that they just completed. I can't imagine that small stretch there with only putting 2 lanes, and it already has sidewalk on one side of the street, would be any more than 3.5 million. That would really surprise me.
Okay. Well, I mean, again, I could send everybody the breakdown of the different phases of what the cost estimates are.
Sure.
So. Yeah,
It is 4 years from now.
yeah. And we generally stagger them too, assuming that maybe it wouldn't get done, so that's why you see kind of a carryover, 3.5 to, then the 850 in the next year, that maybe there'd be restoration work and final bills and stuff, so,
And then you got 750 the year before.
yeah. Yep, so I mean, it's just spread out over from design all the way through construction over multiple years.
Okay, so the 750 you're telling us is design?
That wouldn't be just design, that'd probably also start to be right-of-way acquisition and probably even start at construction, so.
And let's straighten the manager out here so that we get a feeling
Yeah.
that we're not spending 750
Right.
only on design on
Right,
this
no,
thing.
no. yeah.
Thank you. I want to just make sure you're straight on that one.
You got utility work oftentimes ahead of,
Yeah.
there's several things.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we get 30 cents, yeah.
Any other questions on the CIP? Seeing none and hearing none, we'll move on to the next page, or the next thing we want to talk about as we get through the CIP.
What page should we go?
Page 13, I believe, is where you want to turn to. That's after the CIP portion.
All right.
Is that right? Everybody there? The purpose of this form is just to kind of show you how it would look. This is what would go forward. This page right here on page 13 shows the 30-cent increase that we talked about. So the only increase in our tax asking from last year is the 30 cents that was in the CIP portion. And again, I will remind you, you can't go up from that, but you can go down from that. So by adopting this at the proper time does not mean that come the hearing time, that you couldn't make some changes at that time. So you can see that we're going up to $17.54 at this particular thing. And this is the certified front page that goes back, that we have to certify with the state of what our budget is.
And to be clear, if Public Measure A passes, that will be at 1654.
And I've got a later on in the
64.
1664, yes.
I've got a page just like this towards the end, and then we'll talk a little bit about how that works with the sales tax piece. So yes, absolutely, it's in there, and we can make those changes.
And all these projects stay the same year with that, correct?
Well, you're adopting a 5-year CIP, so you get to look at those yearly after, it's a 5-year, so as years progress, you can make changes every year from that point, so.
And we're not asking for an increase in year 3 or year 2 or 3 for these projects if Public Measure A passes.
Public Measure A, our goal is to continue to keep that 60 cents down for as long as we can.
Well, it's actually 90 cents now,
I know, but
if it passes. If it doesn't
that is correct.
pass.
But I'm talking about last year's, and I get you make that. So yes, our goal is, or the instructions we got from the city manager is to make sure we're monitoring as that money comes in, I'll talk about later to show how that
Okay.
sales tax
All
piece
right.
goes in, so it gives you a level of comfort when we get to that point. So again, this page you're looking at now is the front page of what we would certify to the state for our budget, and your public hearing would be on that piece. Other questions?
Just so that we understand, this would be a 50-cent increase this year?
30 cents.
30 cents, I'm sorry,
Yes, sir.
to 54?
Yes, sir.
So are you also saying that were this public measure not to pass, that subsequent to that, that we'll see another 30 cents the next year and another?
Well, I can't tell you
20
about
cents?
future years because we can't, it's difficult in today's world to project what our valuations are
I
going to
know,
be in
but you
those
got a
future years.
5-year CIP here.
The 5-year
Have you not projected
CIP,
what it's going to be for the next 5 years?
it could be up to $1.50 increase if it stays the same.
Okay, we just want to make that
Yep.
clear.
Yes, yes, sir.
Thank you.
So $1.20 more plus this 30 cents.
That's what we're
Yeah,
projecting at
is-
this time.
All these projects.
Without sales
Right.
tax.
To do all these projects without the sales tax.
Yes, sir.
I think we just need to be clear to the people that are watching at home and to any of the media that's here, that that is the goal, to try to get some of these done,
Correct.
which we need to get done.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. If there's any other questions, page 14 is really just the calendar, how everything works. So as you can see on today's date, the 28th, this is kind of the workshop to kind of go through this process that we're doing. And then on the 11th, we would look for the city council to adopt, or just to set the public hearing for March 11th for our hearing, which is after the sales tax ballot comes before the public. The shaded area you see there, those are the days that we have to make sure that we get them published, so it just kind of lays out to, once you pass those, you can't be too far out from the public hearing, so that gray shaded area just kind of gives us the window we have to publish that. But assuming if there's not any questions when you set it on the 11th, we would look to get that published as soon as possible in that shaded gray area.
And just to really make that point, we don't have an option of waiting to publish until after the referendum. So that's why we're stuck in that position. That we need to do the approval on February 11th and then have the budget approved March 11th.
Other questions? Page 15 is actually what you could do on the March 11th should the sales tax pass. You can see that we would now be down to 1664 if you look at the bottom of the page. Okay.
And Bob, before you go further there, the only difference in the detail behind that is in the debt service fund, dealing with the capital projects. So right above the 1664, you see that 297 rate. That would be the debt service piece of our property taxes. That's the difference from the earlier page that was 387. Otherwise, Bob, the rest is,
Yep, and I'll go through it just a little bit in some of the, and some, a little bit of the detail in the other, but yes, absolutely, that's the major piece of it. But we also thought in page 16 and 17, I think it's 2 pages, and 18, I want to talk a little bit how the sales tax piece flows through so you can see it. So with or without the public measure passing, we still have to build a budget as if it might. So on the revenue page, you can see if you look at the special revenues piece, that's where sales tax comes in, and I think we highlighted it for,
Yeah,
if
you
I'm not
have.
mistaken. So you can see that 37 million highlighted in the revenues piece, into that piece. So that's really the only thing different from the revenue side. Then we'll move into the expenditures if you don't have any questions about that.
Anybody?
Okay. Page 17, staff attempted to try to put some place markers in the state form, should it pass, so you can see how that's going to work. And so you can see that the highlighted piece of the $1.3 million, it's under the fire department. There was discussion, as part of your discussions with the public, that $1.3 million to help cover for the SAFER grant going away. You can see that that's now in here, should it pass. If it doesn't, we obviously don't have that. Other things that's in here is library services. You might recall that was part of your conversations as well, as potentially having the library open up a few more hours than it was before.
No, it will be,
Yes.
not potentially.
No,
We've-
I don't get to make the decision, so I don't want to be presumptuous in that, so, yes.
Well, we passed a resolution saying
Yes,
that it will
yes,
be if
yes.
that passed, so.
Yep.
The mayor's
If
absolutely correct.
it doesn't pass, then that's just a number that we can move forward in that, so. And of that 797, 93 you're seeing in that area, that number will increase by about $370,000.
And
That includes that increase, yes.
so there's already numbers in there that
Yes,
was not
absolutely.
sales tax.
We still fund the library already, so.
So the increase for the services for library hours is how much, 300?
370,000, yes.
And what is the other amount that's listed in?
That's just our normal operations that the city funds through the library.
Okay. So we're still committed to those
And they do
other funds.
get grant funds, and they do get other things from the state as well.
We're just not committed to the 370 unless it passes.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's just operation. This is the difference. in
Well,
operation.
make sure you see both sides of it. I mean, you can see under the general side, C, that's part of the operations, and the special revenues, that's where, or section, that's where we do get other funds from other areas to help fund the library. Yes, sir.
One question. I notice you have a figure here at permanent, column H, 2,400 for parks. What does that represent?
Column, which one, I'm sorry?
H, column H, parks.
So those are donations, I believe, right?
Yes.
That have a very,
$2,400, yeah.
It's what?
It's $2,400, you're talking about that piece?
Yeah, what
Yeah.
does that represent?
I think it's typically donations that have a very specific use that has to be, like, money given that says, has to go to library books, or
Parks.
parks in this case might be a specific park, very, very defined funds, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Just seemed odd
Like
sitting,
an endowment where only the interest can be spent, and it's just always sitting there.
okay. Thank you.
You bet. On page 18, the capital project piece that you saw, that piece of the sales taxes was built into this as well for special revenue. So I believe that $11,500,000 is made up of neighborhoods and street infrastructure that was discussed during the budget process. And I'll get to the debt service piece here shortly, but again, that goes into that piece. If you can see line 75, oops, sorry. Yep.
I was just asking Scott, that 11.5 million is additional revenue
It's-
on top of what we're already putting into street improvements and
Correct.
neighborhood improvements,
Yep.
correct?
Yep,
Okay.
The ones we tried to highlight-
We really need to, I mean, that's something that probably we should make sure that everyone understands, that there's additional revenue that's going directly back into our neighborhoods from the sales tax.
yes. So we tried to highlight the ones that had the sales tax pieces in it, so it's a lot
Right.
easier to follow in this piece. So the forms are actually more than this, and there's more detail that goes to the state.
I know, but
But we do that. Yes, absolutely, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is anything we spend here, we have to true it up at the end of the year to show the public that we did exactly what we said we were doing.
right.
There's also a section, I believe in here as well. If you recall, during lessons learned during the stormwater piece, there was a recommendation from the infrastructure group of the public that we designate a certain amount of money to go back into the stormwater, and there's $550,000 if we get sales tax that would go back into that piece. Other questions?
Line 75.
Where's that at?
I believe it's part of that. It's in a transfer. It would be in the transfers.
Down at the-
That's 65.
Well, of that 18.5 million goes back to the debt service fund, right? It goes back into our debt service fund that we said we're going to lower our taxes, and that's what we used to lower the 60 cents down. So in that number is 18,500, or 50% of what we're projecting getting in sales tax is being transferred back into our debt service fund to be able to utilize to buy down those projects that we talked about, to buy the rate down. Because we hadn't talked, yeah, any question, does that answer your question?
That's part of the 65 million.
Yes. It's not all the 65 million, it's a portion of 65 million. I believe road use is a big chunk of that as well. And that's where a lot of the streets projects that we're talking about gets done out of that as well. So again, on 75, of that $18,500 will be shifted over into the debt service fund to help lower that rate down that we talked about, the capital projects. 550,000 will be transferred over into stormwater to be able to do stormwater projects. The rest of that number that's made up is primarily road use.
It's primarily right.
Road use funds?
That's the 65 million.
Happens no matter what,
Yep.
the transfer would
Okay,
happen.
and that's 65 million. You said 18.
And other than me wanting to juggle, yeah, other questions?
Yeah, but lately, we've been getting engineer estimates for projects, and the actual bidding has been completely out of line. Example, that bike path repair was estimated at $450,000, and the bid came in, low bid came in at like $573,000. Have we taken into consideration the increase in construction costs we're seeing here that we've seen lately?
Primarily, that's what we try to do. We try to build in inflation factors and changes for those future years. This particular year, we put this together as late as we can, so we're assuming that we've built some of those things in, but in today's environment, there's shortage of contractors out there, and sometimes the competitive part isn't working as well because everybody's so busy in other projects. So it's really hard to put your finger on that, but engineering spends an awful lot of time on that, trying to get it as close as they can to that point.
Thank you.
Yes. And with that, I believe that we've shared everything that we've intended to in today's meeting. If there's any other questions you have, please let me know. But otherwise, we would anticipate on the 11th of February that we would be bringing in that first sheet we brought in that said this is what we certified to the state that's setting the public hearing for it. And then that would be on March 11th is when you'd actually have the public hearing, which is after the public measure of whether sales tax passes or not. But last year, we talked about having to have two different budgets. This year, we tried to incorporate it into one. Obviously, if the citizens choose not to do the sales tax, we can't do those projects, and we'll go back to that 30-cent increase. And we'd be on target for $1.50 over the rest of that 5-year CIP increases to keep the projects that are in there today.
Mr. Manager, and as we talked about the local option part and given some of the things that we had to do after the June 30 event and everything else, you know, I'm worried moving forward, you know, about our bond ratings and how it is that we're going to boost our funds, and so that we can at least maintain or maybe even increase to a AAA. And also, I'm worried about all the stuff that we put on the capital side that we bond. Are we going to move on some of this work through if the local option sales and service tax passes, that we will get some of this on a pay-as-we-go basis as opposed to using those funds to leverage bonds?
So absolutely, part of the discussion that I've had with the full council even is to utilize sales tax as pay as we go, as opposed to issuing additional debt wherever possible. And so we would be able to show you those opportunities over the 5 years and which of these capital projects would have cash as opposed to borrowing attached to them. So we could absolutely come back after a successful vote and show you what that plan looks like. As far as the bond rating, and I'll let Bob jump in at any point
Nope.
as well, but, there are like 16 or 17 factors that go into the bond rating. Capacity is one of them, and so we have state law that limits how much we can issue debt. We have self-imposed limits on how much we issue. About 80% of what the state allows is our current
Used to be
goal.
60, go ahead.
Yes, and so that is a concern, and that is one of the factors or the variables right now that we are pushing high on, and the amount of debt that we have on the books and what we're looking at moving forward. So that is absolutely one of the factors that that we don't look so favorable in, the amount of debt. So another purpose for that sales tax is to reverse that trend.
And how about fund balance? That's probably one of the factors also.
General fund balance is actually one of the factors that weighs about the same as the total debt in looking at all the different factors. The council and staff have done a fabulous job of increasing the general fund balance over the last 8 years. And because of that, it helps weigh out, the positive factors of the general fund balance compared to the amount of debt. We've been able to maintain our bond rating. And so in order to get to a AAA, which I would like to see us do, because that enables us to have a lower interest rate on the debt that we do issue. So that's real savings to the community if we're able to get that AAA bond rating. We can come back with a full plan that would probably be a 5 or 6 year plan to get there. You don't just change your bond rating overnight. We would need to increase the general fund balance yet again. It's currently, the policy's at 15% of our annual spend. We would need to see that policy increase. We would need to reduce the amount of debt by using pay-go instead of borrowing. And then we would need to actually see some improvements in our citizenry demographics from earnings capacity. And so there are some of those factors that get all the way down into how's the economy going and how are your citizens doing economically. So the neighborhood improvement aspect of the sales tax becomes very crucial as well to our bond rating. That is one of the factors as well. Disposable income.
So that citizenry, so that's maybe an example where the minimum wage staying stagnant impacts our ability to get a better bond rating?
One of the 17 factors, yes.
I did
Yep.
not know that, but
I would say it's one of the second-tier factors, but it's definitely there, and it's mentioned as a weakness in our credit rating. So we'll come back and give you a full conversation on that if we're successful. I would tell you that I would not recommend trying to go to a AAA bond rating without the sales tax in place. The fiscal stability and the other elements would outweigh that desire. So where we're at now with a AA is sufficient given our situation, but absolutely with the sales tax, we should try and accomplish that.
So if I could just add something, so as part of when we get our bond rating, we have briefly said something to that to our bond rating firm, that, hey, that's kind of in our radar. The next time we talk to them to talk about our bonds, it'll be issued most likely in July or August, and we'll know by then whether that ballot, and then we're going to continue to say, how can we get there, so they know that's on our radar, and they want to be just as helpful for us to figure that out as that you'd like to see it happen as well.
And so we have you said our goal of 15% ending balance fund
That's a policy.
is a policy, sorry. And we've generally, a couple of these look like they're closer to 20%.
The utilities are actually at 20%.
That's
The
your
general
call.
fund is at 15%.
Okay.
The bond ratings are separate. We have a separate bond rating for our utilities from our general debt service. So, and those are strong bond ratings as well.
Any other questions, anybody?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I know you were all hoping to be here for another hour, but for those of you that are excited enough to want to spend some more time with us, we'll be back here this evening at a city council meeting. So unless anybody else has any other statements or questions, let's declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you all for attending.
Reminder to council, we're meeting on Wednesday,